with the Mount Allison boys whatsoever, which administration and real life sometimes doesn't always go hand in hand. As this wasn't the case, often universities were the ideal place for girls to find a husband at this time. But starting off was with material culture. In the 1920s, of course, the idea of the flapper came on scene, so shorter skirts, shorter haircuts were very popular. Material culture as a whole was becoming more accessible as clothing was cheaper to make as well as easier to purchase. You see this in the Mount Allison handbook as the advertisements were kind of dedicated towards genders. So the girls would have dresses and the boys had like suits kind of aiming towards whatever gender. Also, cosmetics was kind of becoming more respectable at this time. So girls were starting to use beauty makeup as a way of as being seen as being beautiful, as well as being able to attract a mate through that. This is also kind of backed up with things like Coco Chanel, as well as the Vogue magazine were coming on scene at this time. So kind of print culture as well as media culture was helping to reiterate the fact of dating as a whole. Of course, the difference between courtship and dating was the big transition at this time period. Courtship, of course, was when a young male came to call on the woman, so it was more in the private sphere. This was a very kind of regulated, supervised event. The girls were expected to provide the entertainment, food, topics of conversation. Basically, the guys just had to show up. Of course, when dating started to change, girls started demanding, I want to go out. So the idea of coming down with your hat on was a sign of terror for men in the 1920s. Of course, that means I'm leaving the house, that means you have to pay for my time. This idea of men provide the entertainment, what in the world do the women provide ended up happening. Of course, this kind of was a bit weary with the administration here at Mount Allison and other institutions. So with the idea of the flapper being a bit more sexualized, attending fussing parties that encourage physical relationships with boys, the idea of keeping the college girls pure was important. This meant that chaperones were always supposed to be on scene. All of the documentation I saw or I looked at, it was only the girls that chaperoned. You could not have a male chaperone you. It had to be a senior member of the class. If it wasn't a senior member, it had to be a junior. So there was also restrictions on chaperoning. If you did a poor job chaperoning, you would kind of be nixed. If not, you would be fined. It could even lead to some type of suspension if you were a poor chaperone. So you can kind of see that it was important for the girls to kind of be seen as chaste and pure. So youth culture kind of developed at this time period as well. So if we can't keep the girls away from the boys, we'll keep them busy was the idea. With things like Girl Guides, 4-H Club, the Young Women's Christian Association became more popular. It was created beforehand. Also, here at Mount Allison, there was a girls' hockey team. So if you did not walk back from the hockey rink fast enough, you were fined. If you did not walk back to the hockey rink with a large enough group, you were fined. You're starting to see this kind of separation of, if you're going to be out in public, you have to be with a group, otherwise you could be getting into God knows what. One of the big ways that the girls and boys at Mount Allison could see each other was through church. Of course, the university boys would be sitting on one side, and the college girls would be sitting on the other. Kind of like meal hall, if any of you guys remember, there would be gossip and chatting. I'm sure there'd be pointing even though you're at church. It is a social gathering. It is also one of the points where you could be escorted back. So boys could escort their lady loves home from the university. This is one of the few times you did not have a chaperone. So this is kind of one aspect of being kind of privatized. Just to kind of hit it off, the idea of the automobile was happening. So some people saw this as a moral outrage. It was considered a brothel on wheels. So you can kind of imagine the age of jazz and the fast women, fast cars is kind of happening. It wasn't until 1928 that you could go on a car ride here at Mount Allison itself. So it took a long time. It was actually under William Ross, who was the principal of the ladies' college, that the girls kind of got some more leeway. Co-ed dances were starting to happen, cinemas, going on walks, things like this. It wasn't until he entered that they could host boys in the ladies' college itself. So this kind of transition between very structured, very parent organization, like I'm not going to let my daughters go out, was kind of shifting. This allowed the women to have more freedom, although the administration was quickly catching up and putting restrictions on as soon as the girls found this freedom. However, it was freedom nonetheless. Also with this new style of dating, it kind of alienated a few people as you had to be economically stable. So if you were from a lower class, you were not able to provide as much entertainment. This would of course affect your popularity as this new dating scene was like, go out with as many guys as possible because then you'll be seen as the it girl. So dating of course was then seen as a social status. Also, town and gown was affected, especially here in Sackville. There was one story of a maid entertaining a boyfriend. Two members of the town came to William Ross, who was the gown in this case, and complained. So it's not just the administration that was worried about it, it was also the general public, so making sure that their college girls remained like the pure, good girls they were supposed to be because they were here at college and not with their parents where they could get into less trouble there. So that was one aspect. So basically the idea of going from private to economic was the biggest change within dating itself. So having new entertainments available for the young men and young women was kind of the biggest change. It was also the biggest change of letting the women out of the residences. So anytime that a girl would leave residence, they had to sign in a charge book. So if you were leaving residence, you were only allowed having about 3 days out a week. So as you know now, if you want Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there's your 3 days. You can't go to the library, you can't leave the residence. They would also be fined for silly things like leaving their window open because the college boys would walk in front of the residence, so they couldn't call out. They weren't supposed to associate unless it was under supervision. I want to kind of end off with this quote just to kind of give you an idea of how much they did interact with one another. William Ross kind of states that, did anyone ever tell me I would miss the sight of boys by leaving an all-boys school? So this idea that the boys were at the college so much that he didn't miss the sight of boys at all. In fact, he probably wished that they wouldn't be around as much. The most interesting thing I did of this paper was I got to use our own archive. So I got to look at the minute books of the ladies' college, the diary of Victoria Ross, who was William Ross's wife, the student handbooks, which were male and female. So if you wanted to look at the male version, you would look at the Young Men's Christian Association. If you wanted to see the female one, it was the Young Women's Christian Association. So even within the administration, it was separate. It was very one or the other. So in conclusion, dating at Mount Allison in the 1920s had a number of challenges that the girls faced. However, they were finding more freedom in dress, in activities, also kind of in being able to be out more public as opposed to being constricted in private. Thank you.
So sounds all normal to me. So I don't see what the big issue is. But what about organized events by the university? So I'm just thinking about theatre, ordinary. In John Reed's book of the history of Mount A, there's funny little bits about theatre, like theatre productions being too risque or not risque or what have you. But that would be dates as well available there too for theatre productions, or were there dances?
There were dances. There was dances when William Ross came on scene. It was